December 1st, 2019. Joe here at Simple Life Show. I appreciate everybody for joining me today. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. This will be my second attempt to actually make this video. I was rambling on and forgot that my mic was off. Kind of a bonehead move. But I'm going to go ahead and just continue forward and start over with this video. Antonio Guterres was just recently in the news. Now, if you don't know who this is, he is the UN Secretary General. He's been in his position for the last few years. He's been talking a lot about one world government. He's been talking a lot about climate change. He's really trying to forward this type of climate change government intervention when it comes to climate change. He really wants to forward that idea that the government has the answers to everything. So I'm going to play this clip for you, and we'll talk about it after it's over.
Climate change is no longer a long-term problem. We are confronted now with a global climate crisis. And the point of no return is no longer over the horizon. It is in sight and hurtling towards us. What is still lacking is political will. Political will to put a price on carbon. Political will to stop subsidies on fossil fuels. Political will to stop building coal power plants from 2020 onwards. Political will to shift taxation from income to carbon, taxing pollution instead of people. We simply have to stop digging and drilling and take advantage of the vast possibilities offered by renewable energy and nature-based solutions.
Okay, so I'm going to stop that right there because he really said everything I really wanted to highlight. Now, Guterres has been in his position for the last few years. He's made a lot of speech when it comes to climate change. That's kind of one of the first things that he really talked about when he took office, I believe, back in 2016 or 17. And he's made a lot of speeches when it comes to a one world government, government interference, government control of a lot of stuff, that the government really has the answers to everything. And that's really what we're talking about. We are kind of going down a really dark road here. And before I say that, number one, I am not a climate denier. I am not someone that believes that we have no impact on the environment, that it's all one big hoax. That is one of the most ridiculous things that I don't really think that anyone with any kind of rational brain really believes. On the other hand, I also don't believe that we're going to be dead in 12 years, as AOC would have you believe, and even this Antonio Guterres would have you believe, because he is saying basically that we are almost at the point of no return. Now, they've been saying this for many, many years. No one really knows. Not even the scientists really know. A lot of it has to do with just straight predictions and computer models, which have been proven wrong over and over again. Now, this isn't an argument to do nothing either. However, we aren't doing nothing. We have been actually doing a lot better over the past decade. In fact, the past 2 decades than most people would like you to believe. Now, if you just look at the figures and numbers, and we'll actually get into that, you can see how the United States is actually getting really better at that. And this whole government interference and complete control, shutting down power plants, grounding all airplanes. There's a lot of people out there, especially AOC and those who are in her, in her group, in other words, those who subscribe to a lot of her ideals and this socialist slash communist type of ideology would have you believe that we should all be, just sitting in the dark, and we should basically look like North Korea. And that is not anything that is going to really be helping the situation. And even if we did that, a lot of some studies have been done that it would only actually change, the Celsius increase over the next 100 years by, I think, like 0.3 or something like that. Something that is, just completely not even worth it. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as we go forward. I'll try to not make this video a little bit long as I usually do, but I can't promise that. Now, this Guterres has, he's been in the news a lot here recently, and he's constantly talking about the one world government, going forward as a one world. he was recently talking about making sure that the internet and connectivity for the entire world is something that's a top priority by 2050, I believe it is. And that is one of his main goals. Now, I'll read you this last quote here from his last speeches. These ideas can be building blocks towards a shared digital future that we can be proud to pass down to future generations, a future with one world, one net, one vision. Every time you hear the word one world, please understand that this is just code speak for communism. And I know that's going to sound really bad. I know that's going to sound like it's hyperbole. But you also have to understand this is something that is constantly being pounded in the media to us. It is something they are constantly saying. Why are they saying it? If they wouldn't be saying it if they didn't want it, if they didn't want a one world something. Now, we can't have a one world something if we have a whole bunch of separate nations doing their own thing, but cooperating with each other. That's the way it's supposed to be. A whole bunch of nations that are proud of their nationality, that work together and trade with each other, but each country has its own ambitions for its own people. And that is one of the best ways, I believe, to go forward, because if we have a whole bunch of nations that are strong and they have their own economies and they have things that they are good at, that is how an economy actually goes forward. When you have the UN and Antonio Guterres at the helm trying to pass mandates and dictates and all this kind of stuff that is going to put regulations on everything else and tax the hell out of all these corporations, and of course the children out there are saying, yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Let's just bury the corporations in taxes while they're on their iPhones and whatever other technology that came from a lot of these evil corporations. It's a lot of hypocrisy that going on in our political environment right now. There is a lot of misunderstandings in our society when it comes to the whole climate debate and stuff like that and government control. Please understand, I recently got into a argument online, which I don't really like to do. I don't like to argue with people, but it was it's one of my liberal friends that I follow, and they were calling for democratic socialism. Of course, it was a Bernie Sanders post. Obviously, he's an open socialist, but he wouldn't be calling himself that. He calls himself a democratic socialist. Please understand. Let me just impart some knowledge to you so you understand going forward that socialism, that any kind of bad ideology that we have identified throughout history, such as fascism, such as communism, such as Nazism, and stuff like that, they all have their own bloodline. They all have their same common cord that runs through the heart of what they are. Their entire ideology is anti-capitalism. It is socialism. Every single leader, such as Lenin, Marx, Hitler, Mao, all these, they were anti-capitalism. They wanted total government control over everything. Now, you could make a lot of arguments about us, the Nazis and stuff like that, that when they first started out, they weren't specifically like that. Some say they weren't socialist at all. Please understand that there is not one form of socialism. It is an ideology that has different flavors. Leninist and Marxism type of socialism. The National Socialists of Germany did not like that. They fought against the communists. They did not like their brand of socialism. It's just as much as any different sects of religion, even though they might be just a little bit different. They all have the same common cord running through them, but they're always quick to point out where one is wrong. No, mine's right. My brand of socialism will work. Now, democratic socialism hasn't really been tried anywhere where it's succeeded. I don't even really know where it's actually really succeeded. I mean, you could point to Sweden and Norway, but they tried straight up socialism. It wasn't anything such as democratic socialism, and if you know anything about the history with that, they fell away from that. They embraced capitalism because that's the only way they could save their country. And a lot of these people that are screaming for socialism don't realize that simple fact of history, that the governments of a lot of these Nordic countries, their economies began to collapse after 10, 20 years of the socialism experiment. We talked about this in a previous video. We're not going to go over it again. So we also know, so the young people out there that are espousing, the wonderful tenets of socialism and the whole ideology, and we need to get rid of capitalism. We've all seen the meme out there where you have some school children there that are putting up. I don't have the picture in front of me, but I'm sure you've probably seen it where they are saying that capitalism is the disease and socialism is the cure. No, true capitalism is the cure. True freedom is the cure to a lot of these problems that we have. I'll get into some other solutions as well, but socialism is not the answer to anything. All socialism does, it leads to either Nazism, it leads to communism, it leads to maybe even something even worse than that, which wouldn't even be imaginable. But I'm sure that in this day of age, we could probably think of something even worse, especially with the technology that we have. Think about it; it could be even worse. So children today are being used at a higher clip than they ever been used to forward the socialist agenda. And what better way to get everyone together than through climate change, right? I mean, it's really the best way to do it. It's our human nature. If you really think about it, it's a human nature to actually want to help other people. There's some people out there that are sociopaths that don't want to help anyone, and they're just all for themselves. And of course, they probably have some psychological issues going on. They probably weren't loved enough when they were children. I feel bad for them. Okay, I think we all have a little sociopath in us as well. A lot of us can be very cynical in nature, but I think the majority, at least 90% of us, when we see someone that's hurting, when we see someone that is physically hurting, economically hurting, or anything like that, we want to help them. We don't want to see people in pain. That is our natural instinct. That is our natural desire for people to be okay. Now, we have tried to turn this desire, at least the government is trying to turn this desire to, we want to see people equal. I don't care about if someone's a millionaire. I do care if someone's starving to death. I don't want that person to be starving to death. I want them to get food. I want them to have shelter. Yes, absolutely. I can get on board with that. There's a lot of things that this society, as because the United States is such a giving society. We have been one of the most giving in societies, since our inception. Probably one of the most society that gives the most to charity here in the United States. Now, is this solving everything? Absolutely not. I mean, there's a lot of issues going on. There's a lot of social safety nets in place. I believe that there should be those social safety nets. I'm not going to say that we should live in a 100% no holds barred. If you fail, you fail, and that's it. There shouldn't be any safety net whatsoever. I'm never going to say that. I'm a reformed Democrat. You know this. Okay, and I don't think there's too many people out there that would say, I think that people who have made wrong decisions should die or something like that. I think that no matter how many bad decisions you make, as long as you're not breaking the law or something like that, if you break the law and all this kind of stuff, then we have a discussion on what should and should not be legal. But if you're in prison for hurting someone else, it's something that you've done, you hurt someone else, yes, you should be there. But you should be reformed as well. Yeah, we should be focusing on reforming people instead of strictly punishing them. Okay, that's also my Democratic part of me coming out. It's not something that a lot of conservative friends of mine do not agree with as much. But like I said, I'm middle of the road. I'm more conservative than I ever was Democratic, but that still is inside of me. So as far as using children for this whole thing, yes, we really want to make sure everyone is okay. We're going to get behind this climate change type of thing. We want to save the world. There's other things that we can do that we're actually doing right now that are helping to resolve the issue, but we're not paying attention to them. Children are being used at a much higher clip. We've seen the Green New Deal. Of course, that has been that was shot down because it was absolutely absurd and ridiculous and nonsense. Anyone who has read the Green New Deal, which I have and a lot of people have, it was almost like reading a sketch of Saturday Night Live. It was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we can't eat meat anymore. We can't use airplanes anymore. We have to shut down all coal in the entire coal industry and stuff like that. A lot of people simply want us to live in the dark and to be starving to death, to make sure that we can avoid a few Celsius degrees temperature raise. Now, if we were to do that, they've already run the numbers. They've already done, like I said, they're just predictions, but the same predictions go for rebuttals as well. And if we were to live in the dark for years and years and years, that would only change it by like 0.3 Celsius over the next 100 years. There's been studies done on that. I don't have the studies up. Feel free to research it. I didn't have time to really to bring everything up. This is just stuff that I've read in the past. But we all know that children are being used more and more now. Here recently, there was a case in Canada where Canadians are suing the government over climate change. Here it reads, a group of children and young adults filed a lawsuit on 25 October this year alleging that the Canadian government has violated their constitutional rights by promoting and enabling fossil fuel development in spite of acknowledged risks from global warming. 15 people aged 10 to 19, of course, we constantly see that age group being referenced here because they are the most impressionable. Their brains have not been fully formed. I'm not saying they're stupid by any means, but this age group is more prone to anxiety. Therefore, they're going to be the ones with the biggest, the loudest mouths out there, the loudest voices. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not saying that kids need to be quiet or shut up or anything like that. I'm just saying that their propensity to have anxiety over these types of things without all the information makes them very, very efficient weapons to get different types of government mandates through the legal system. So let me see. Argument that climate change will impinge, on their right to life, liberty, and security. Lawsuit also urges that climate change will interfere with basic equality rights, given the most severe effects of climate change will be borne by future generations. Now I'm going to skip forward here. It's called a test case. Because there is no explicit right to a healthy environment under the Canadian Constitution, the case hinges on an untested legal theory that the adverse impacts of global warming will impinge on others' fundamental rights, says Nathalie Chalafour. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Co-director of the Center of Environmental Law and Global Sustainability at the University of Ottawa. Given the inevitable impacts of climate change on lives, property, and culture, she says the argument is sound. I believe this case really does have legs, Chalafour said. If the plaintiffs prevail, the lawsuit could give Trudeau political cover to act more aggressively to curb greenhouse gas emissions, she adds. This is the only thing that I really want to point out in this test case, because we have to have test case in certain things before we start rolling out a whole bunch of government controls, right? Because if we just start laying out certain things and saying, just as much as the whole gun control debate, you can't really start going door to door just because you feel like taking the guns, right? You have to start somewhere. You have to start in some test cases. Look at Virginia, what's recently happening in Virginia. They're outlawing basically all different types of semi-automatic weapons, what they call under the umbrella term of assault weapons. They're also outlawing martial art instructions. And here's the thing. If you read a lot of this thing, I'm going to kind of go on a tangent here with this whole Virginia case, but if you actually read it, okay, they're trying to outlaw. Some people will say they're trying to outlaw just training in militia groups, but the way it is written is any type of training that intended to cause harm to others through the use of X, Y, and Z. This could be simple firearms training. So if you're actually taking firearms training, guess what? They are teaching you where to hit someone to inflict the most damage and to cause death. That's how I was trained. Anytime that any type of training for firearms will go into that, where to actually hit your assailant, how to breathe, how to pull the trigger, all that sort of things, recoil anticipation, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously conceal and carry and so forth and so on. This isn't anything about guns, but we also have to have test cases, and this is just something that I think that's really important. Before a government rolls out anything that's going to infringe on other people's rights, they have to test it out in a control group. And this is just another control group that's happening in Canada right now for this type of legal framework that will give Trudeau and eventually other governments more leeway to take away your rights, to say who can do what and how much we're going to charge per metric ton of pollution. Now, I am not pro pollution. I think that we are doing a really good job of actually cleaning up a lot of the pollution, at least here in this country. I think China, even though they are polluting at the highest clip than any other country on this planet, they are also taking positive steps forward to actually make sure that this is curtailed at least a little bit and going forward in the future by, number one, planting a lot of greenery, including trees and shrubs and stuff like that. They are constantly planting trees over there. In fact, China is probably one of the green. I want to say the quote unquote greenest, because they're not greenest, but as far as little greenest, they are actually planting a lot of trees, and they're actually greening up the country a lot. So this is a good thing because trees and any kind of plant life sucks the carbon dioxide out of the air. They use it for sustenance, expels oxygen. So going forward here, we all know about the Green New Deal. We talked about that. It's dead on arrival. It was ridiculous. We can't live in the dark for decades to have some sort of minimal impact. Also, this one thing I really wanted to point out here is that this is a chart. I don't know if you can read this or not, and I'm sorry if you can't. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. Okay, so this is a primary energy consumption, energy expenditures, and carbon dioxide emission indicators. Now, this is just for 1950 through 2017, but I think it gives you a good idea what's going on here. We're going to go to this emissions and emissions per capita. Now, obviously, since 1950, our population has grown. So this whole idea that, yes, if we go to it's 15. I think it was believed 15.6 metric tons carbon dioxide per capita. 15.6 in 1950. It went up to, and it skyrocketed, if you want to call it skyrocketed, back in the early 2000s. I guess it got 20.8. I believe was the highest that it got. Also went in 1975. So it's been going up and down. But per capita, it's back at 1950 levels. If we look at the actual emissions of carbon dioxide, it started at 2,362 in 1950. Of course, it went up by a lot, spiked in the early 90s. Looks like it actually spiked in 2006, I think it was. And ever since then, it started to go down. Now, yes, a lot of the stuff that Obama did made a positive impact. I voted for Obama. I voted for Obama twice. I was a lifelong Democrat. I think that we actually are making a lot of positive improvements. If you can see here, since 2007, it's been steadily decreasing every single year, just as much as the metric tons per capita has been decreasing by a wide margin every single year. So we are making a lot of positive strides forward. Also, another thing here, this is from the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions on renewable energy. At a glance here, this was from 2016. Renewable energy is the fastest growing energy source in the United States, increasing 67% over the 16 years between 2000 and 2016. Renewables made up nearly 15% of the U.S. electricity generation in 2016, with the bulk coming from hydropower and wind power. I think hydropower is something that we really need to be looking into a lot, especially using the tides and stuff like that. I mean, that's just something that never stops, as long as we have a moon, of course. I don't think that is going to change anytime soon. Solar generation is projected to decline from 7% to a total U.S. Renewable generation in 2015 to about 36% by 2050. We are making a lot of positive strides forward. Solar generation is actually really at an uptick, and a lot of people are coming on board to solar renewables. Globally, renewables made up 24% of electricity generation in 2014. That's globally, much of it from hydropower. So we really need to focus on hydropower and solar power. Renewable ethanol and biodiesel transportation fuels made up 20% of total U.S. renewable energy. That's like natural gas consumption in 2016, up from 12% in 2016. So we doubled it over the last 10 years. So we have actually made a lot of positive strides forward. If you actually read and you watch the news and you listen to a lot of these people that are marching the streets, you would think that we're polluting everything, and we're just it's getting worse. But if you've actually been to some of these protests, which I have, just to view them, afterwards it's there's trash everywhere, and there's some people that actually want to pick up the trash, yes. But I think that a lot of this has to do with someone, people wanted to be part of something bigger. People wanted to feel like their life matters. I think this is one of the biggest things that a lot of people, a lot of the driving factor when it comes to this. Yes, we are concerned about the environment. Yes, we are more ecologically conscious right now. However, do we need to have the government take control of everything? No, we do not. This leads me to my final point, and the whole reason for me making this video. Minimalism could be one of the biggest things that we could do, one of the biggest things that we can focus on to actually curb a lot of these problems that we are having when it comes to climate change. Here on climatetracker.org, it reads here as consumerism and climate change. While polluters such as oil and cement companies and coal-fired power plants have largely contributed to climate change, and these are things which we must address urgently, as we have talked about, overconsumption as a lifestyle has had a major impact on the environment as well. Think about it. Overconsumption is the reason why a lot of these companies have to overproduce. They have to keep up with demand. It's all about economics. The more demand there are for stuff, the more that these companies are going to have to keep polluting to create all these things through petroleum products, plastic products, and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that we get is from China. We'll get into that. It is no secret that consumerism has contributed a lot to climate change, according to a study entitled Environmental Impact Assessment of Household Consumption, published in the Journal in Industrial Ecology. What people consume is responsible for up to 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Not only that, production in terms from other countries to consume, like China, has also increased steadily, which only adds to carbon emissions. Today, developed countries have to report their carbon emissions, but we consumed a lot of stuff that is produced in China and other developing countries. Their carbon emissions are helping support my consumption, says Ken Caldera of the Carnegie Institute for Science in the United States. That is where the heart of this lies. And I just really want you to step back and really think about this. If you are one of the climate change, let's just say if you're an alarmist, because on one end of the spectrum you have alarmists, and the other end of the spectrum you have denial. I am right in the middle. I don't think that we should be alarmed, and I don't think we should deny. However, if you are one of the trending towards the alarmist, please understand that your consumption really plays a part in a lot of this. It is where everything starts. Where you spend your money, that's where everything starts. That's what keeps the economy going. That's what causes pollution. So if we as a species, if we as Americans, at least Americans, Canadians, North Americans, wherever, if we start to really think about, hey, where am I spending my money? Do I really need this? I did want to read something else here. Naomi Klein, in her book, This Changes Everything, says that the truth is that if we want to live within ecological limits, we need to return to a lifestyle. Looks like there's some grammatical errors in this. To a lifestyle similar to the one we had in the 1970s before consumption levels went crazy in the 1980s. If you remember, in the 1980s, that's where everything kind of exploded. Everyone was buying everything. It was a free-for-all. It was wonderful, right? Until everything just kind of collapsed. Even Pope Francis, in his encyclical, has blamed the culture of consumerism for climate change. That's one thing I can actually agree with Pope Francis on. I don't agree with Pope Francis on 90% of what he says, but I can agree with him on that. Fast fashion, for example, has grown as a industry because of overconsumption. According to an article by Sarah Ripper from Uplift, people are buying 400% more clothes than we did 20 years ago. And the environment, the environmental impacts are staggering. In 2014, it was found that 85% of man-made materials found on shorelines were microfiber synthetic materials used in clothing. And with 2 billion parts of 2 billion pairs, excuse me. There is a lot of grammatical errors in this article. Pairs of genes produced every year. Imagine how many liters of water is needed when a pair takes 7,000 liters of water to produce. Now, even though there was a lot of grammatical errors and there was a lot of truth in this article. Okay, so we really need to think about what we're actually taking in, what we're consuming. What do we need and what we do not need? I think that we have a problem in this country, and a lot of countries for that matter, but specifically this one, because we overconsume so bad in this country that we really don't take into account where all this stuff comes from, how much pollution was actually caused by that pair of jeans, how much was actually caused by that iPhone that you just bought, or that car that you just bought, or anything like that. We don't need a new car every single year, people. We don't need new jeans every month. Okay, I am a minimalist, and this is one of the biggest things, and one of my, I guess it's the only ideology that I subscribe to, other than the Constitution and the republic for this country. What kind of drives me is minimalism. I really think about what I need and what I don't need, what is going to bring me the most joy at the least expense. I don't really buy a lot of clothes, and if I do, I go to thrift stores. It's not because I can't afford new clothes; it's because I understand that, just consuming just for consume, just to consume just for consumption's sakes. Excuse me, I can't even talk right now. Is something that will completely ruin this society. It's already ruined the society. People are just they have this microwave type of mentality that when they want it now. They don't care where it comes from. But they are also the same people that are marching the streets talking about pollution. So we really need to think about what minimalism is and how it could help us. Now, is it the savior of everything? Is it going to save us from every single type of problem? Absolutely not. But I think that it can save us from a lot of stuff. I think it can really help with the climate change. I think it can help us with our mentality. I think it can help us with eating cleaner foods, especially if we grow our own foods. Think about how much pollution goes into creating all those vegetables and that meat and stuff like that. Now, I understand that a lot of people don't have ranches; they can raise their own cattle and stuff like that. But it's pretty easy to raise chickens. It's pretty easy to have your own greenhouse if you have enough land for that. Sometimes you don't even need a lot of land. You can have urbanscape type of greenhouses, and they don't even have to be greenhouses. There's a lot of different things that you can do. It's all about just not being lazy and just doing it. And it's not so much just about saving the planet. If everyone did it, absolutely, I believe we would be on a really good path to doing this. I would love to live in a society where, we just kind of drove around on mopeds and we lived kind of off the grid and we kind of lived a minimalistic life. That's my utopia personally. I would love that. I would love to live in an environment that wasn't an overconsumptive type of environment that's just full of people that just want to just get more and more and more. I think that's their freedom. I think that people have the freedom to do that. However, if you want to keep buying stuff, as long as the demand is still there, as long as the supply is still there. However, at the same time, I think that we need to change our thinking on how we run our own lives. And I think the government has nothing to do with that. I think the government is only going to ruin things in the end. If we allow the government to start taking control of a lot of our freedoms, I think that we need to take control of our own selves and what we're actually consuming on a daily basis, and we need to put some more thought into it. It's all about small steps going forward. So until next time, this is Joe with Simple Life. I hope you have a great day and a good Christmas coming forward, or I guess in the next 25 days. The countdown obviously begins now. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.